I'm going to go ahead and just verify who's in attendance here. We have Councilmember Clay Capp. We have Councilmember John Rutherford, Councilwoman Zulfat Swara, and Councilwoman Conte Toombs. So we are going to move forward, and I believe we have somebody here for public comment.
Yes.
Go ahead. Share your name, and we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, so I'm Trent Benjamin, multimedia specialist, musician, and community advocate from Southeast Nashville. I represent District 4 on the Davidson County Democratic Party Executive Board, and so I was the youngest person on the ballot in this year, and back in March. I'm 18 years old. And one of the amendments that I'm here to speak on today is Councilmember Rutherford's amendment to lower the age to run for Metro Council to 18. And it's very important that as a city we don't miss out on young talent from folks like, for example, Nick Roberts up in Indiana. He's now the youngest elected city council member across the country at 23 in a major American city. He has a very impressive resume, admittedly much more impressive than mine. He's been campaign managers for multiple campaigns, been a catering professional, among a variety of other things that I'm admittedly forgetting right now. But he's only 23, and he got involved in politics right after he graduated high school and has worked campaigns ever since. And so for a lot of people my age, that path is starting to become a lot more common. Like, for instance, I'm not going to college. I've been freelancing photography and videography work for the past 2 years now. And so because I was able to land a job doing that and then turning that into my own small business, I don't need to go to college. And so the college path just doesn't work for a lot of folks. And so restricting who can be in council based on whether or not they're old enough to have graduated from college starts to become a little more arbitrary of a line with regard to that cultural shift. And so that's why I'm in support of this amendment, because it's very important that we don't, as a city, that we don't miss out on young talent like Nick Roberts and a ton of other people across the country. So yes, thank y'all.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. Last meeting, we had decided, as we were discussing, we wanted to talk about considerations for what and how much of what we have in front of us we actually put on the ballot. One of the considerations that was shared with us at the time was that we don't want, I guess the best way to put it is ballot fatigue. When we talk about how many things are actually on the ballot and how much attention span and time the voters, will be able to give, as well as being able to ferret through all that information that's being thrown at them. That doesn't mean that they can't do it. It just means we need to be conscious of their time and of their wingspan. And so, do you want to add anything to that?
I
Just
guess,
in terms of, where our head should be?
yeah, I think that we're anticipating some large ballot measures this year. I think the mayor has already announced that there's going to be a transit referendum that has not been to council yet, but upon council approval would be put on the ballot.
Anybody else want to opine about that? Okay, so what I'd like to do now, just in terms of helping us to start scaling this down, is I'd like us, everybody had gotten this data last time, to look at the previously submitted submissions, and let's start the process of elimination. And we can, certainly look at the ones that are here now and discuss them, and then we'll just go through them one at a time and then eliminate the ones that we don't want to move forward, and then that'll give us time to focus on the ones that we think we would like to discuss. If there are none that we decide we want to discuss, then that will just inform what we do from this point forward. So, we'll just start at the top. We're going to hold on the new submission because I want to do this in an orderly fashion and do it by category. So we'll look at ones that are in section B, which were the administration and additional housekeeping proposals from 22, and then C, those that were removed from consideration. Then we have our perennial submissions, which are in section D, and then preempted. I don't know that we even necessarily need to cover that because certainly those would be submissions that would get preempted. So we'll go ahead now and we'll take a look at B. And if there's one that you would like to address in there, we can look first at clarifying the legislative veto process under section 5.04. And Hannah and Margaret, if y'all can share with us the reasons that those were potentially, or not potentially, the reasons that those were not brought to the ballot at the time. Yep. Would be a good place to start.
Honestly, I would have to go back and watch the meeting. I don't recall why these two were not moved forward. It doesn't look like we took a vote on those, so I don't believe that the committee took a vote on this. So I'm not entirely sure why those would not have moved forward and just kind of remained on the list of submissions without action. I know that the last Charter Revision Committee in 2022 had some pretty significant items that they were moving forward, so these were kind of it'd be great if we could do it, but going to that ballot fatigue issue, it was long, it was lengthy, so.
Okay, because I looked at the video and I couldn't find it. That's why I called and asked earlier if y'all had any insight, because I didn't hear it. Okay, John.
Well, we've had a change of administration, so do we know where the current administration stands on these? Have they said anything one way or the other?
No, I don't recall where the veto one came from, although that's kind of just something that's been unclear for a while. The finance director submission, I know, is based on the fact that we had a finance director resign in the middle of the term, and it kind of caused a little uncertainty. We've addressed some on the council side, we've addressed some of that. What we did last term, addressed some of that with a rule change to allow divisional directors to sign off on legislation, but it's still something in the charter that could use some cleaning up, maybe.
Council Lady Suara.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I remember that one very well. And we had like a bond thing that needed to go on, and we didn't have a director, and I think it's a good thing for us to make sure that we clean up. I do have a question about the veto one. Not privy to that conversation. Can you maybe explain what that is trying to achieve or what that is clarifying, so I can have a better understanding of what it is?
I'm looking at the section right now. Let's see. Every resolution or ordinance shall become effective unless the same be approved or disapproved by the mayor and returned to the council at or prior to the next regular meeting of the council occurring 10 days or more subsequent to the date when the same was delivered to his office for consideration. It also allows for a line item veto. It's the possibility of it not being returned to the council or being returned unsigned, and whether that is actually enough for a veto or not. So it's just.
Maybe we should get a Metro legal opinion on that one. Can you follow up with that?
Yeah, I can make a request.
It sounds to me that language from section 504 is that it doesn't create any problem that couldn't be solved by the mayor actually vetoing the legislation. So, is that right?
Affirmatively vetoing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that my reading of that isn't that unclear. But if I understand that these two under item B have likely arisen from actual instances in the past that gave someone the idea that there could be a problem. I remember the one about the finance director, but does anyone remember or know what the actual circumstance was that led to someone finding a problem with, this 504?
That's a good question.
I don't
There's
know
a-
specifically. I have my
That was the finance
kind of
director one.
suspicion.
Yeah,
Some up
yeah.
for the
veto of the finance director.
veto.
I was asking about the veto one. My understanding is that the finance director one is the finance director resigned, and there's
Yes,
some clarity about
yes.
the authority.
things,
And I think that, I regard that as a pretty significant.
There's really good legal memo.
Problem.
Yeah,
point.
somebody wrote it.
Right, no, I mean, I think that one's a pretty significant problem. I'm not, at least right now, seeing
With the veto.
any
Right.
major significance to the problem in the first one, but that doesn't mean it's not there.
I think it's because both, like kind of both instances, the mayor can return something unsigned to the council and it not be a veto, and can return something unsigned to the council and it be a veto. I think that accompanying it with a letter or something, which I think is maybe contemplated in the charter, might clarify that, but I think that that's the thing is like
How can it be a veto if he signs it?
She said if he just
unsigned,
signed.
unsigned by the mayor.
Unsigned.
So it could or could not be a veto, even if it's unsigned, it could be a veto, could not be a veto.
Based
So-
on the,
And there's a timing
based on the
component
date?
too.
Is that just based on the date?
There's a timing component.
Timing.
And it shall be effective for it. If he disapproves, he shall return, if he disapproves, he shall return the same to the council without his signature,
Awesome.
which return may be accompanied by a message indicating the reasons for its disapproval. Then there's the other section I read about the 10 days. So it's kind of unclear whether, like, which one of those things applies.
Is if he or she returns it before 10 days unsigned, it's a veto, and returns it after, I mean, fails to return it within 10 days, that's enacted? Is that
Every resolution or-
how it reads?
'Cause I thought something could go into effect without the mayor's signature.
He can.
But it sounds like, we have the
He
language.
can sign it, or he cannot sign it, and then if he,
I thought it was the
it
10-day
becomes
period.
effective unless
If it's
it
not
be approved
returned.
or disapproved by the
10
mayor and
10
returned to the
days.
council at or prior to the next regular meeting of the council. Or more, subsequent to the date.
So is the unclarity about the timing, how you
Yeah, like,
calculate
I think
the
it is the
time?
timing.
The timing.
Because if it's, whatever the threshold is, if it's returned unsigned prior to the threshold, it's vetoed. If it's not returned unsigned prior to the threshold, it's enacted without signature. Is that, I mean, that's basically what it's trying to say?
You trying to figure it out. That's why it's
I think
unclear.
that's what he's trying to say. He's trying to say.
Yeah. But if we can't calculate the time based on the language, then I don't know that that's a hugely significant problem, because the mayor can always actually veto.
Yes.
But it is a problem.
So do we believe that this rises
I
to the
would
level
not
of
say
that- I
something
would
that
not
needs a
say that
deeper
it is
dive? I
an
think that's the
urgent
acid
problem.
test here.
Or
No.
that it occurs a lot.
Director Ari, would you mind if I read your section of the charter, just for a brief moment?
Chair, I don't think it's a
Did you have it?
major thing. I
Thank
think
you.
that the mayor can let people know if he's returning it, he's vetoing it or not. I don't think people need to vote on this now. I don't think it rises to where we need to bump it.
Let's just go around the room and have a conversation about it. Councilmember Toombs, do you want to wait for Councilmember Cap to do his read?
I need to read it myself.
Do we want to punt this one
Yeah,
to the
put it at-
next
Yeah.
meeting, and we'll just,
Yeah.
that'll give us time to do a little due diligence, and we'll be
Yes.
making a decision based on information. Okay, all in favor of moving this forward to the next meeting for further information to be presented?
Can I move to delay that vote by 90 seconds?
Sure.
Or we could move on to something else and come back to it. I'd be comfortable
We
with
will
that.
do that, and we can move on, and we'll move that to the heel. How about
So as
that?
to not waste time.
We will do that. I love that plan. Okay. So moving on to the finance director, clarifying the interim position. Does that rise to the level of requiring that we move it forward? Or are we okay punting it to the next potential referendum? Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Suara.
Yes, ma'am. I think it's important. I think it could have delayed us doing things, but we were able to find a walk around it to the point wherein we were able to do what we need to do, and the city did not shut down. So my take is that if we have other things that are urgent, that needs to be on the ballot, then we should prioritize that. Especially since we were able to walk around it and didn't shut the city down. It's good to clarify the language, no doubt. But if we have other things, then I rather, that's my take on it, that it's not disturbing anything, it needs to be done. But let's see where we are with other stuff first before we make a decision on it.
Okay,
Is
so
the- Oh, go ahead, sorry.
can we mark it as like a maybe?
The
and then
maybe,
see how it
and then
weighs
come
against
back.
everything
Mhm.
else?
Are you okay
No,
with
I
the
was
maybe?
gonna ask along the similar lines that voting at this point to eliminate it from consideration or keep it on the list.
It can stay on the list if you want it to stay on the list,
I-
then we just need to identify if that's what we want.
I would ask on that one, is there a fix for this outside the charter? Because, I mean, we had that situation last time and it was handled. So is there something that we can do to, you know, that's beyond, not within the charter to fix that scenario?
So some conversations that I have had about this indicates that there is a procedural fix. It's just in my head as to whether or not we have legal clarity as to whether that's a kosher fix or not. And so that's where my head is I would like further clarification. So I'm okay as a maybe as well.
My basic view on these, all of them, is that if we're doing a prioritization process, the items that go to sort of actual potential malfunctions in the operation of the government are ones that we should prioritize, in my view. And this seems like it really might be one. I wonder if we can request to see if the current administration regards it in the same light, and also if Metro Legal thinks that the fix that the chair has in mind is, applicable and kosher, or not.
Right.
Is that a request we can submit?
So if everybody is okay with the submission of this request and getting more information for our subsequent meeting, do I hear a motion that we agree that Section B will be submitted for further information and resubmitted, or readdressed at the next meeting?
This item about the finance director?
Well, I'm saying B.
So moved.
As to the first one, I would be curious to know what led to it being proposed, like what was the actual issue that we ran into, and secondly, yes, if, I mean, the way I read that, I don't know that that's like a giant problem, or even
But
a
if that's more
problem.
information.
But if somebody can read that and say what the problem is, I would be very interested to hear that, so
So more
in
information.
that spirit, I would also vote to keep that one on the list as well.
Okay, so
I
is there a
realize we're not
second
vote
to the
yet.
motion?
Second.
Okay, and all in favor of moving this to the next meeting after which we are gonna get information?
Aye.
So,
Aye.
Okay, I'm an aye, so we will move that. Let's see, removed from consideration or not considered by the Charter Revision Committee. If you note here, you'll see the disapprovals for each one that was removed from consideration. And if there's any one of these that you would like to bring forward, I personally don't have one. If anybody else wants to submit something from C, feel free to bring that up.
I think the council suggestions should have some type of discussion.
Sorry, which one?
Which
The
one?
ones that reference the council, so the first one would be the no September council meetings. And the impetus behind that was that we're in session year-round, and just giving council members and staff a break. Changing council meeting days, there's a lot of discussion my first term about not having enough time for committee meetings and what can we do about it. And it's like, well, the charter says this is what we do. And so that was the impetus behind the first and third Wednesdays, so that committee meetings could be Monday and Tuesday. Proposed budget deadline, changing that from May 1st to April 1st, was just to give the council 3 months instead of 2 months with the budget. The next one may be an issue depending on how council members are classified, but council pension eligibility, there's folks who, end up serving on the council for a long time, and they don't get any credit for that service. And that's all the ones that pertain to the council itself.
Other than the council appointments to boards and commissions.
Yeah.
Increasing that number.
I know there's been a lot of work on boards and commissions, so I don't know if that's even necessary. The one about appointing 2 or 4 on every board
Yeah,
and
I think we
commission.
changed something.
Because I know we've changed a lot of those boards and commissions already.
All the code created boards and commissions, I think almost every
I
single
think
one of
almost
them.
everyone.
We have some council
Council,
elected positions on there.
Yep. So why don't we just open the floor for discussion of these? I do note that there were September council meetings, the change of the council meeting day, the proposed budget deadline, pension eligibility, and the increased council appointments to boards and commissions and the board appointment charter amendment. Those were not even submitted for consideration in
They were
22.
submitted after the deadline.
We know
That's
why.
the only reason they weren't, because they were
We
submitted
know
after the
why.
deadline, so, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
given that, I think, yes,
Can I just want to make one comment, and I probably should not be making this comment, but the deadline for the filing of the mayor's proposed budget, we did that once before. So there was a charter amendment years ago that changed it to March 15. And the issue that the administration ran into was that they were there was no time when they were not in budget season. They were, it gave no, like right now, I think they have like a 4-month break maybe where they're not in budget season. And so moving it back to that time just didn't give any sort of break, and and that's just the one perspective I know. So it was removed and it went back to May 1st. So we've already been through that process, but just giving you the history on that.
But this is April 1st, so they get 15 days.
yeah, I can also say that we looked at this back in sometime in my first term, so between 2011 and 15. And that's when we separated capital spending plan and moved its time frame. And then we again also tried to back it up. And just from the perspective of getting the budgets put together and being able to affect the different departments coming before the mayor and then being able to come before us and getting all of that stacked up, it was a logistical nightmare. So it didn't work that time either.
Okay.
I think it was
Because
2006 and then again in 2008.
really?
Yeah.
And then it hit the council floor
It
sometime
just
between
seems like
that
the
other
council has
timeframe.
such a short amount of time with the
2
budget.
months.
It really is not a full time. What'd you say now?
I said, but the mayor does the most work
So
with
it-
the budget. Not the
Right, and so it's a
council.
very mayor-centric, mayor-heavy budget.
Yeah.
It's a mayor
really-
It's a
heavy,
mayor
it's a
budget.
mayor heavy charter.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So the mayor
And
needs more
so,
time.
the idea was to give the council a little bit more time to, make whatever changes the council is gonna make. Because when, I think departments start submitting or start meeting with the administration, I think in October of every year, their stuff is due by February, their budget submissions are due by February. So the administration gets, 6 months doing budget stuff, and we get 2? So. And people grumble about it every
do.
budget season, but like nothing
I think
happens.
And this is just from what I recall, the issue being around the time these were changed back was that the, so the new budget goes into effect July 1. And so that gives, all the budget folks from July 1 to October to kind of work on seeing the
Ramping
budget
up the-
get ramped up, and then all of a sudden they're back into budget season. And if we move it when we moved it back to, or when it was moved back in the charter to March 15, that bumps their schedule back to,
So it was
August.
actually changed to March 15th?
yeah.
Okay.
It
And
was
then-
changed to March 15, and then it was changed back to May 1.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay,
I used to keep it in my,
okay.
the piece of paper that had the change in here.
So if it would, just for clarity, this can be one that we at least get some information from the finance director and from the mayor's office in terms of what the pros and cons might be to a change, any change, to the budget process and what the implications might be. And that would just be it would be entered into our records. It would be helpful to inform future charter revision committees that might be looking at this, not to have to go back and reinvent the wheel. And at least we would have the information in front of us to make a completely informed decision.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Agreed.
That's lovely. Since it makes sense, would you make a motion?
I move that we keep this on the list for further consideration and opportunity to reach out to the administration and finance department.
Second.
Let us step back to no September council meeting days. And let's vet that one.
I
So,
like that one.
so
As
we're,
Hannah's going, yes.
I like it.
so
I like
council is in session year round. So the idea is a break, basically. Most of us have, another full-time job where we file quite a bit of legislation as a body. Just having a mental break to be able to step away and then come back renewed, that might help relationships amongst council members as well.
Hannah and Margaret, is there a better month than another for this, number one? And number two, how does that impact zoning?
It would definitely impact zoning, and public hearings. Right now, we have the rule that zoning public hearings are the first meeting of the month, except for June, because we're in the middle of budget. And so it would impact that, and I think that we saw from, January with the cancellation of the first meeting in January, that also has an impact on zoning matters, especially when there's a snow week in the middle there. But so it would have an impact on that. There's nothing to say that we couldn't change our rules again about, public hearings for zoning matters. Way back when, we used to do it every other month. So,
Yes.
If it were a permanent thing, though, then planning could adjust their schedule,
Right.
we could
Yeah.
adjust our schedule.
yeah, it is a scheduling thing. It's not a possibility, but everybody would have to adjust their expectations about when their when their zoning matter would work its way through the council.
Councilmember Suarez.
Yes, I'm in favor of this as well. And I think that, although I'm not sure which month, whether it's better in August or September, but I do think a month's break is warranted, and I think it'll be good. We can go with the September, because when you also think about it, and that's why I said August or September is what I'm thinking about, is that when you look at people in election, especially election year, you look at some people in runoff, some people not in runoff, all of that plays into all of that. Some are decided weeks before, that people are still running. I think that time should be an off time, in my opinion, and it gives us time to just get all ourselves together and get ready for the next year instead of it just running into each other. So I'm in favor of that 1 month. I think August looks better from my perspective, but I'll take September if that's the consensus.
Well, let me say this about August, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in every 4 years, when the council changes over, anything that is not heard by the end of August dies and has to be reinstituted. So if we close out the month of August, that pushes it back to July, which may not be
Okay.
in our
Then
best
September
interest or
it
that
is.
of our community that's looking at.
Especially since that ends
Deadlines.
up being, like, for an ordinance, the last time that you could
Mhm.
file would be, what would likely be the budget
Right.
night.
Okay.
Which
So
that
September
would
it is.
Last
preclude
budget
that
meeting.
completely.
And September makes sense with what you were just saying about the election runoff cycle, because during an election year, September is the month that we do kind of.
I was just gonna mention that it's already September in an election year, so we're really talking about just adding 3 more Septembers to the time that we're talking about off. So I would personally favor that as well.
September.
New person?
You know, well, so
Give him something to read.
No, when I was reviewing this, I had a similar thought that everyone's brought up about the transition during the election time because of everything you've already said. And I wonder, I know, Chair, we're probably too late to do this, but I wonder if this is amendable in some sense to clarify transition schedules as well. Just because we had some council members getting sworn in at different times. The mayor doesn't really have a defined transition period. I think there might be some utility to defining that. And, you know, as I was looking at this, I had a similar thought, but I think it may be too late in our process to meaningfully amend any of these, but I almost wonder if it makes sense if we're looking at this oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, I wonder if we're looking at this, and I'm supportive of moving this forward for all these reasons, but we could say that this makes sense for transitional reasons, it makes sense for end of the year reasons, and it makes sense to maybe let the mayor have a defined transition period too. It's probably good to let the mayor staff up the office before he or she takes office and so forth. So I wonder if there's a way we can structure a transition period that's sensible and defined. And as part of that, it will make a lot of sense for the council not to be meeting in September.
I'm gonna ask for a legal opinion here.
Yeah, there's state law on the issue of transition, and I would need to go back and look at all of the research that I did during the last transition period and how it would relate to an amendment to the charter before I could opine any further.
So, again, do you wanna punt this one to the next meeting for further consideration based on the additional information?
But we're moving it forward. It's not
Yes.
in the maybe.
Yes. Yes,
It's
it's
in the
staying.
move forward with more information.
Yes.
Okay.
Is it, yeah, can I just clarify if it's subject to amendment or if that's a non-starter? Or if we wanna think of those
She's gonna
as-
find out.
Okay.
So
I
we
think,
need to say whether or
Oh,
not
whether
it's subject
the
to a
charter is
non-starter.
subject to-
no, sorry, whether this
Whether
proposal
this
is
one-
subject to amendment.
That's a,
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Okay, if
Absolutely.
if this could be, you know, that could be part of this conversation, I would favor moving this forward either way, but
At
I
the
think
end
it
of
may
the day,
make
when it
sense.
comes to the structure, we have to make sure that the structure of what we are presenting to the public to vote yes or no on is correct. And so if that offers greater clarity, then that's our job. So, unless there's some legal reason why we shouldn't, I think it's incumbent upon us to do that.
That works for me.
So do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Do I need to make a separate motion about researching a potential amendment to the proposal, or we'll just
Yeah, I think
request
we
it
got it.
informally?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think we've got it, I think we're good. Okay, let's go to changing council meeting days. Margaret, would you like to opine? Hannah, would you like to opine?
I don't have an opinion.
I don't have an opinion.
I think,
We might have to change some internal deadlines,
oh, yeah,
but I think we would probably make it work.
Yeah.
Is it Wednesday like church nights though?
yes, that was,
It
that
is
was
the
gonna
Bible
be
study
Is it
for a lot
Bible
of
That's what I
study
was gonna
night?
say.
It's Bible study for a lot of people, but some people have Tuesdays too for Bible study. But it is probably Bible study for most church people, Wednesday nights.
I think because of that, I'm guessing that's what we stuck with the Tuesday, so.
Because again, every year, people complain, we don't have enough time for committee meetings. And so, but we're bound by the charter, so it's like, okay, do we want to change that or not?
And did we not discuss meeting the week before council?
We had
What
talked
was,
about
what
that,
was,
yeah.
where did that land to where we actually meet the week before?
For
So we
committee
have, for
meetings?
committee meetings instead of the week
Of the
of.
week before the
Yeah.
council meeting.
The changing the committee dates would require some significant rule changes and would require some significant scheduling changes, deadline changes. It would be a really big overhaul to the way we conduct business, not that we can't do that, but it would be a really large overhaul to the way we conduct business. We, from a staff perspective, having committee meetings the week before the council meeting becomes difficult because we're trying to work on getting legislation done for the upcoming, or getting amendments done, getting legislation completed and filed for the upcoming meeting that it would require a change in the pacing.
Like, for example, just to, like, some kind of real world examples, if we met Wednesday and Thursday prior to the council meeting, the agenda comes out Wednesday, currently. We wouldn't have any amendments, because our amendments don't go out till Monday morning. The analysis won't be out till Thursday at noon. So that's kind of, potentially we'd change some of that. The agenda coming out, I think, is the tough thing, to kind of get around, because that's based on the filing deadline, which is Tuesday. And so shifting that back kind of shifts back a lot of different
And I think
deadlines.
So let me provide some context here. For me, it's not whether we meet on Tuesday or Wednesday. I think Tuesday is fine because of the church thing. But what we run into is this. There's committee meetings on Mondays and there's committee meeting on Tuesday. Then we go into council meeting. When those committee meetings are happening, people are in different places. So then we get to council, there's no summary of the report of what is discussed. We don't have time to go watch the video of what was discussed. But then we just want to say that people said, why are you pulling things off consent? It was discussed in committee. I wasn't in that committee. And so how do we do our work well when we're not privy to those conversations and we don't get somebody that says in committee we discuss X, Y, Z and this is what we decided. Maybe that's what we need to do. But that's where that 1 week give us more time to review it.
I think that problem could potentially be solved by changing the pacing of legislation such that we would still have committees on Monday, Tuesday, but we would not be addressing that legislation until the subsequent
Okay.
council meeting.
Okay.
That way, if we did that, if we made those changes, all of those items that were on consent could be noticed on the agenda that they were approved on consent, and they are actually listed out on a consent agenda that we then could just pass, much like we do first reading items on consent and not have to read a
So
full
how
agenda.
does,
Let me throw a little perspective out here too. This is not the first time this has been discussed. It was discussed years ago in the perspective of strengthening the body and giving us more teeth in what we do. Because when you spend 15 minutes looking through a list of legislation and you're flying through it, you feel like you're doing nothing but rubber stamping what's being presented to you, and it doesn't give us a good opportunity to do essentially the two things that we were hired to do, and that's look at zoning and make sure that it's fair to our constituents and to the city, as well as looking at finance and digging into where are we spending our money, where's our money coming from. And so if we can find a way to give ourselves the opportunity to really vet these proposals the way we are expected to vet these proposals. I mean, look, these rules, these ordinances were set up back in the day when there wasn't as much in front of them.
Yeah.
So what we have is we're trying to fit 10 pounds of fish in a 2-pound bag. And stuff gets missed and spills out and falls between the cracks. And so if there's a way, to me, this rises to the level of doing the work of the community. And to me, this rises to the level of something that we need to give a harsher look at.
Yep.
I agree.
And I think that I would assume that the voters want us to do our job, because it's their money. John?
I just want to throw a thought out there, and that is that as we're discussing this now, we don't know what the next council is going to look like in terms of the size because of the litigation. So would a 20-member body work any differently or potentially any better within the current committee structure? And should we therefore wait until all that is figured out before we make a decision like this?
I would like to take a tackle at that. I don't think it matters how many people you've got in here. It's a matter of the flow of legislation that's coming before us and the bandwidth that we have to capture that. And if we think about it, and I could be completely wrong, so speak up, but if we are carved into 20 as opposed to 40, that means the scope of your zoning work
Unless you become full-time.
multiplies exponentially.
Right.
And so your work becomes harder. Maybe not harder, but more time consuming. And so I think it's even more important in that circumstance to give us the time that we need to attend to the business that we were elected to do.
Unless it becomes a full-time body, and I don't know if that's in an option, but if it's not a full-time body, if we're still trying to make it work, then it makes more sense for us, because that's what I run into. I read the analysis, but I have questions. Now, if other people have asked those questions in other committees, I would like to know what those questions were so that I can take that into consideration. But I don't have the time to watch the committee meetings, look what is being discussed, and then, and I do mean this, we got to a point now where people get upset when things are full of consent to ask questions, and I'm like, are we supposed to do this job in a way that you know you're making good decisions for your constituents? So whatever we need to do to allow us to be able to do that is worth a lot more conversation, in my opinion.
I agree with that. I think we should keep it on so that we can keep talking about it. I'm very interested in the pacing of the legislation and what that looks like. If
yeah.
that solves this, like.
Yes, please.
If we can pace the legislation in a way that it doesn't, make a difference if we change the date, like, I'm interested.
Please, let's talk about it.
So Margaret, Hannah, could we have for the next meeting a lesson in what it would look like if we were to change it and what is affected? And I know that's a lot with everything else you've got going on.
Figure something out.
But in a perfect world, if
do a flow
you,
chart.
yeah, I mean, my question would be, in a perfect world, if you could wave a magic wand and fix it, what does that look like?
Now, one devil's advocate for the pacing thing, just real quick. It will likely mean that committees are about legislation that you're not voting on
Yep.
Tuesday night.
Yep.
So that, there might be some confusion there. That's kind of the only thing with the pacing that I see as a potential problem, is like, well, Monday you guys were talking about this, and then I watched the meeting on Tuesday and it wasn't on there.
It will take some
Or council members
education.
It's
thinking,
education.
It takes some education of the
right.
public and the council to know that that's where we're going. And here's the other thing that I think will work for the pacing. So we talk about it this week. We're not voting on it on Tuesday. That gives us another week to get more information before we actually vote on it. I'm in budget asking for information. They're like, we'll get it to you before Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't get it. Sometimes you don't have time to read it. So I think the pacing actually give us more time. By the time we get to the vote, we've watched the committee meetings, we've received additional information, and we're making a much more informed decision. So I'm very much interested. I've been banging my head over the wall on this one for a long time. So
just for clarity, in terms of following our rules within making changes to the charter, if we determine that we're not going to change the day, but we're going to change the process, is this particular line item, is the wording sufficient, or are we creating a new submission?
This is not something that would require a charter change. This is a rule change. Council
See?
rules.
There we go.
So, but it is something, just to let you know, and to Hannah's point, it's gonna require a lot of education, and it's a giant systemic change to the system, not only for the council, but for departments and for the public seeking to have their, zoning legislation move through. It's a big systemic change, so it's not
And I'm
something
gonna
that we
add
can
something else.
do
I'm gonna suggest that we pull this off and ask the vice mayor to discuss this with the rules committee, maybe have a joint meeting with rules, and address what next steps, if any, we need to move forward with, to try to address this, since it doesn't have to be addressed through a charter.
And one more thing that I want to throw in there is that even with the conversation and the rollout, if we do go along with it, does not mean it has to start immediately. It could be something that we systematically, maybe for maybe in October, something
Right.
like that, to give everybody
Right.
time to get used to it. But we're proposing change to make things better, maybe even next term. But at least we're looking at how do we make the work better.
I appreciate all of y'all saying this because I've had similar feelings and thoughts about our committee process. I wonder if, having committees that are focused on a subsequent meeting, in other words, we're talking about legislation, then there's a meeting and the committee's material all goes to a subsequent council meeting. I understand that from the council staff perspective, I understand a lot of those concerns that came up, but I would actually want to re-put on the table having committee meetings in the weeks in between council meetings, so that if we're talking about flow, we're talking about public awareness, we could have a week, this week before a council meeting is a committee week, and maybe we could spread out the committees, schedule them for longer, not schedule them on top of each other in some way that's bearable for council members. And then all of whatever gets passed out of committee would be on the subsequent following week's council agenda. I understand that's gonna be very disruptive and would have to be implemented in a way that would require a lot of changes, but at least at first impression, it seems to me that that is a way to sort of have an even better version of what I think we've been kicking around for the last couple minutes, and you don't have an intervening council meeting to confuse the flow, so to speak.
And if you kind of bundle it together of kind of the pacing and slow down the pacing, because ultimately that's kind of what it is,
Yeah.
it slows down the pacing of legislation. We probably could make something like that work. It's just a matter of kind of figuring that out.
Yeah.
Because think about amendments, we submit amendments before we talk about the legislation in committee. So it's like you're
Yeah.
reading it yourself, it's like, well, I think it should say this, and then you don't know if that's a friendly amendment or not.
Right.
Until you get in committee.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is
Yeah.
why
I think
September
this
needs
is
to be
good.
taken off.
I think this is good. I think we've got food for thought. So next time, we'll put this on the punt to the next meeting, pending information from them.
Yeah.
And I think we have a conversation with the vice mayor also, and get her input as well, because it'll impact her as well. So, maybe the four of us will sit down next week with her maybe, or next couple of weeks.
Yeah, we'll figure out a time. We'll figure out a time.
We'll have a brainstorming session.
Actually, it's not.
Okay, so
interesting,
do I
it's not
hear a
even-
motion to?
It's not part of what we're considering at all. It was just something that came up out
What kind
of.
of flowed from it.
Yeah, flow from, so.
So we're gonna look
Actually,
at what our
agree.
options are.
I just want to point out, this is a great illustration of what a committee process could be. We have some time, we're thinking that, I think
It's
that's,
true.
a good,
I love it.
a proof of concept.
Yeah, exactly.
So we need to vote to keep this on so that we can keep discussing.
So we can get more information.
Okay.
Next meeting is gonna be an information gathering session so that we can make informed decisions. Do I hear a motion to move this to next week with further information?
So moved.
Second.
So,
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Is it next week?
Thank you so much. It's not next week.
Okay, great. Just to the next meeting, got it.
Next meeting, which is Thursday, April 25th.
Great, got it.
Okay, let's see, change proposed budget deadline. We have that one that we've punted already, right?
Yeah, the next one was the
Okay.
pension.
Sorry about that, guys. Mismarked my paper. Council pension eligibility. The floor is open for discussion.
So there are council members who, I know this is not, can't be retroactive, but just thinking historically. There are council members who served 16 years on the council. there are, prior to term limits, there are council members who served even longer than that, who, I hate to say have nothing to show for it, because, you know, we're all here to serve, but they have nothing to show for it in terms of, now they're, you know, some are, you know, advanced in age and there's no retirement, there's nothing for them. And I don't think that's fair, particularly in this day and age. The number of hours we put into actually doing this work is not part-time, we all know that. And so I think there should be some type of benefit to it. Now I don't know if we're classified as are we classified as part-time in the charter, or is that an HR thing?
I think that's an HR thing. It's the charter that says specifically that
No pension.
no pension for you, I think for council members, and I think the mayor as well.
We've had that discussion before, that we're not classified as either one. It's people make an assumption that we're part-time when they look at the salary, because the salary is what most people would deem part-time salary. Yeah. That we don't have a true classification in terms of part-time or full-time.
And I think it would be reckless on our part not to get a fiscal note attached to this, right? Because I remember we discussed this a long time ago, and it's expensive. And so we have to figure out, is that the best use of the funds? And additionally, when people run for office, they're not running for office to get a pension, they're running for office to serve.
I mean,
I can see it both
that's,
ways.
I work in state government, I'm a public servant, I'm serving, but I also getting paid for my expertise. I would not do it for free, but I consider myself to be a public servant. And so I think that people should be paid for the work that they do. It's not a volunteer position.
It's not. And it's a full-time job.
So it's not about having a heart for, we all have a heart for service, we're public servants, but folks should be paid for the work that they do.
Again, as long as we have a fiscal note, we can look at it. We let the voters decide.
Yes, ma'am. I do think that the fiscal note is what is going to bring it all down, but I wanted to add that we had this conversation when we were talking about the healthcare benefits, and we all know this work is not part-time. If you're really doing it, we just discussed meeting in between meetings. I'm on a religious holiday, it's Eid, and I'm here having a meeting. Like, it's not a part-time job. It's if you're doing it right, you're putting a lot into it. And when we were talking about the health benefit, one of the things that I always like people to think about is that I have like her, and most of us, I have another job. I'm not a Metro healthcare or anything, but for some people that are, remember that when you're on council, while my resume is being built through my job, all you have is to say, I serve on council. I don't think that helps your retirement. I don't think that helps you in your job or the job career-wise, how much you put into it. And so there are things that, if we wanting people to come in and serve and continue to serve, that we have to make it worth their while. And what I've known in most places is, if you're paying people, you're not paying them their worth, people make it up with benefits. And that's how you make sure that people get. So I'm of the opinion that I'm okay. Some of us are okay, but not everybody is. And we want a council that is for everybody, that can come and we get everyone in. It shouldn't be retirees. It shouldn't be people that have second job. It shouldn't be, we're limiting the people that can serve because of this little pay and no benefits. And so that's where the conversation is going for me. And so I think we should look into it. I think we should get how much it will cost, obviously, but I think we should not, I don't want to dismiss it, because I know there are people that it would help professionally.
Floor's open. Want to add anything?
I don't have anything to add, I agree.
Okay. So do I hear a motion to,
I was just gonna say,
something?
just to note, Metro employees vest in a pension at 10 years currently.
Okay, so if you're serving 16 years, then
And so that's a determination I think that you guys would need to make, is when would council members
council
vest?
vest.
in like the hours, which you have to show like certain amount of hours worked and.
I think you
so-
might have to be full-time to vest. I think
Yeah.
it's 10 years of full-time.
It's full-time because like right now, people will, and I'm thinking about it from the tail end of a career, people will retire, they'll draw pension benefits, and then oftentimes they'll come back and work part-time at Metro, and they're very limited to the amount of time that they can work, because if they go over that part-time work,
Yeah.
then it affects their pension and their pension eligibility. So, I think there are a lot of questions that need to be answered by, finance, HR, benefit board.
But I think that gets into the fact that we don't have a true classification of part-time versus full-time.
I
Yeah.
thought we were classified as part-time. That's
Well, we had that debate in the last term when we didn't know if we were gonna have to get in a really big hurry to trim the size of council down to 20.
Right.
And we were looking at, what that would mean and the potential of going full-time versus part-time, and that's when that came up. Because I remember that conversation being that if we were to look at a new council, if you will, as being full-time, really what we would have to do is just change the salary. There is no classification to change. If it suddenly becomes a salary that most people deem as full-time, then okay, we're full-time. And that's kind of why people look at us now as part-time, because they look at the salary and go, oh, they're part-time.
No, I just look at us as Metro is getting free labor. We're full-time.
Yeah.
We're full-time, being paid a part-time salary. That's what it, yeah, Metro is, we need to note that, taking our wages, what's that thing called?
I move that we keep this on the list so that we can get additional information, fiscal note, et cetera.
And why don't we get the question answered? Who are we, full or part-time?
Well, another thing to
I
consider.
don't know that there's gonna be an answer to
Yeah, I don't
that
know that there's a
because
great answer.
you're not considered employees
Employees.
for the purposes of, for
Yeah,
that
like-
purpose. You're only considered really an employee as kind of a
And
term
if we
of art
were
under the,
considered an employee, what can of worms does that open?
it will open
Well,
a different
it's,
can of
and it's
worms.
hard because, right, like, you're not civil service employees, we're not civil service employees, but like, we can be disciplined.
Yeah.
Council members, aren't, your discipline is the voters.
Right.
Well, and so.
You don't report to anybody but the voters.
I think it would be important to have somebody from the benefit board come explain the ramifications.
Probably Shannon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Shannon and whoever she chooses to bring along, as well as finance for the fiscal note. So, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. So we've got that one checked off the list. Police charter amendment, is there any discussion on this? So do I hear a motion to pull this from consideration? Why don't you, what we should do is we need to put the motion on the floor so we can talk about it.
About it.
Then let's talk about it and we'll figure out what to do. So do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Okay.
the recent state legislation that preempted Memphis.
I'm not sure that I'm aware of that.
So
It just
Memphis-
happened, didn't it?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
just
exactly.
happened. So Memphis had passed a law
Police reform.
where you couldn't, police couldn't pull folks over for like minor traffic offenses. And that was preempted by the state that localities can't pass any law that interferes with law enforcement enforcing state laws.
Okay.
Which is exactly what I was gonna say. I don't think we have the authority to touch this.
Cause I know last term, in light of, George Floyd and all that was going on, there were several council members, that wanted to implement training policies, implicit bias policies, things like that. And we were told that we could not do that, that was within the purview of the police chief to set policy for the department, that the council didn't have the authority to do that. So I think that's where that's coming from.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, any other comment?
Well, I mean,
Councilmember Smart.
I think we've got to a point when we're having the conversation with the department, but there are times wherein, I mean, when you start talking about LPR and when you start talking about, surveillance technologies, there's been times where council wants to put some more meat around those policies, or I know when we're talking about what is the technology that we just fuses, where there's no specific fuses policy by the department. And so I think that's where this came from in terms of if we want to do something to be able to say this is how we want to protect the community. That's just to give an idea of what that is. And so when you're waiting for the department to come up with a policy, if they don't have it, that's what this allows us to do. So
Except that now it doesn't.
with the state.
Yeah.
So I think, so we couldn't say, well, you can't enforce these laws, but their internal policies, I don't think that the state legislation covers that. But the thing is, and I know the community calls on us all the time to do something when things come up, but do we have, just thinking objectively, do we have the expertise to write police policy?
No, I don't believe so, and I think that we need to stay in our lane, and that's out of our lane. At least that's my personal opinion. My dad was an officer. I grew up in that life, and he was a really good one, and did a lot of good for the community, as did many of his colleagues, especially during the Martin Luther King uprising. And there's so much that we don't know about what they do day in and day out, and we're not trained in that. So to your point, I agree. We don't have that authority. What we can do is have conversations with the police, as we have been doing, and when we've had snafus and concerns that have arisen, we've been pretty fortunate that they will sit down and have a conversation and address concerns and present, policy changes. I've listened to them do it time and again in the meetings. That doesn't mean we live in a perfect world, but I think we have to live within the bounds that we've got.
So I think that I'll say Chief Drake is typically open. Now, there have been some clashes and disagreements where council members felt certain things should be done and he did not agree. So, and I'm just talking for conversation sake. Is there an appropriate way for council to have a say?
And I would like, because I know that with fuses, what we did was, we did look at what is happening in other places. And it is other police department policy that we're looking at. And so what we're looking at is being able to present it to the department to be able to say, this is what other people are doing, would you consider it? I think that was the conversation that we had at that point in time. I am of the opinion, we're not going to go outside of state. We're not going to do anything that is outside of whatever we need to do. But I do know that every now and then we do look at what other places are doing. And we do bring changes and policies to different things that we think the department should be doing. I think the police department should be no exception. Now, do we change the policy? Do we vote on the policy? I don't know where that works. I'll let Ms. Dabby tell us how we can do that. But having input on their policy should be something that is not outside of what council should be able to do.
I also think if we can establish good, strong communication, a lot of good comes from just talking and working things out. So.
We would still have the ability to express ourselves as a council through resolution.
Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, and I think that's what we've done.
Hannah, have you found it?
Yeah,
I thought you were looking for the
Memphis.
bill.
I was looking at the charter actually, but I think I found the Memphis bill. It looked like, if I was looking at the right thing, it was limited to traffic stops.
Their bill was.
This state bill.
The
But
state-
I think it was applicable
I thought it
broadly.
was, yeah,
Right.
broadly,
But
like,
it was
Right.
just limited to traffic stops.
like we can't tell law enforcement that they cannot enforce a law.
Okay, so I need to hear a
So then
motion.
that's different then.
Yeah, it's not, I don't think it addresses internal policies.
Yeah, it does
I'm
not
not ready
address
to pull it
policy.
off, is that okay?
Yeah, it's not,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm not ready.
Okay.
So I wanna keep it on here for now.
So do we want to get clarification of that one as well? I think
Yes,
that's
please,
fine.
yes, please.
I'm okay
That's
with that.
reasonable at this point in time, yeah.
I move that we keep it on the list to get further clarification.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Oh, second.
Okay, all in
I'm sorry,
favor?
what was the motion?
The motion is to get further clarification on what is applicable insofar as the state law and what is preemptible and what we have the authority to actually do. And is it through ordinance, resolution, charter amendment, or rule? Increase council appointments to boards and commissions.
Did y'all vote on that though?
We did.
Yes.
Okay.
Didn't we? Yeah.
On which one?
Let's do it again. All in favor?
Aye.
Sure. Opposed? Motion passes, we think again. To the viewing public, we're human. Okay, board appointment, increasing the council appointments to boards and commissions. Allow the council 2 to 4 appointments on every board and commission. This was not submitted either because of timeliness.
Already
I
addressed
think
it.
we've done all
We've done that.
through rule.
Gentlemen,
No,
Was it
really?
rule or ordinance?
Ordinance,
Yeah, I don't
for
disagree.
certain.
Yeah, for certain ones.
Everything on that one.
Okay.
So there are charter-created boards and commissions that have
That-
not
Correct.
been.
Ah,
And I remember this was and this may be tied into like the Fair Board stuff, because I know that was
It is.
a big issue with Councilwoman Sepulveda. But I have not heard it hasn't been raised this term.
It was not
that I'm
it was
aware
not
of.
resubmitted, for this session, for this charter revision committee. And what we did last term was to take a deep review of boards and commissions created by code and ordinance, and change some of those to be council elected positions that were formerly mayoral appointees.
Do you know how many are left after we did that?
I mean, I will say it is kind of some big ticket, boards and commissions, planning commission, fair board,
Is property standards in
right,
there?
property standards board, I think is one, and then other ones that I'm not sure that you would want to change, like employee benefits board, civil service commission.
Civil service.
and I know one of
now-
the things we talked about, Fair Board, was that I kept saying we needed a larger Fair Board. And I wanted to add 2 seats to the Fair Board to make sure it was still uneven. But we decided at the time that that was something that we would punt.
and
Farmers
that's something we
market.
cannot do because it's charter created too, right?
It would have to be
It would have to go to
changed
the
by a
charter, yeah,
referendum.
yeah.
And that's one of the ones that was on here that wasn't
Yeah.
considered.
Well,
So,
and maybe my little plug is that, we kind of have just started seeing the council appointees from the ordinance last term. So I think, my suggestion might be
Simmer.
to kind of let that play out and
Yeah.
see how you guys are,
Okay.
enjoying appointing people.
Quite a few coming up.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
okay. But I think that,
CATV, there are 2 opens,
CATV.
there
I
are
have
3
somebody,
seats
I just
open
need
and
to
1
get you
person
the
has been
name.
nominated,
Yeah.
so.
You
I have
got
some
you got a
names.
notice today.
Okay.
I saw the.
we'll do,
Subject
we'll
more
do.
coming up to-
But I do think, I think we can punch it, but I think,
HRC.
as a
and
refresher, can we know the charter created commissions?
We have a list.
Okay,
Mhm.
and
We can
I
get
think
that
it'd
to
be
you.
good to have that, and then maybe in your list, because I think this is open to every board, and I don't think we wanna do every board. And I think, so when you do that list, if you can put an asterisk beside the ones that you said, this
We're
one I
kinda
don't
thinking-
think, I think that would be great.
Yeah.
Okay. So do I hear a motion to pull this from consideration?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, it's off. Okay, let us move on to perennial submissions on hold or awaiting the outcome of litigation. We have one to decrease the council size, one to increase term limits, one to create super at-large districts, and a second to convert at-large seats to super
Chair,
districts.
I didn't,
Yes,
sorry
ma'am.
to interrupt, but I didn't know if you wanted to go ahead and address the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items at the beginning of section C to, if you wanted to just remove
Oh, my
them.
goodness sakes, thank you.
I did
I
we?
think we skipped straight into.
We just went.
Thank you.
That's it.
Let's go back, ladies and gentlemen, to
Yeah.
C1, the NES Power Board authority to provide oversight for metro government in the areas that are not carved out by state law. It was approved by committee on a 3-0 vote with 2 abstentions in '22, but after NES input, the committee voted to disapprove 3, 1, and 1 abstention.
We got another email from Antonio.
Yeah, I got an earful.
Oh.
Can I move that if any of the remaining items in C, D, or E that we discuss upon motion from someone who wants to advance any of those? Or, rather than taking them one by one? In other words, like,
Why don't we bring that up for a vote as a group? We will decide how we want to move forward for the rest of them, so we don't make a unilateral decision. So is your preference to go through these one by one, as we have been, or is your preference to take those that anybody on the board considers, or in the committee considers worthy of discussion?
I think we should take it as a whole. I think the reason why we jumped was because the question you had asked
Exactly
is
right.
if we were gonna take anything, and we just look at the one that we wanna talk
Yeah.
about.
Right.
So since we didn't talk about them, I think we can take them as a block.
Okay.
I agree.
All in favor?
Aye.
So that was
Opposed?
the motion.
That was easy. It was a motion, see?
Such.
Okay, so we'll take section C. Is there anything in here you would like to pull?
C, I thought we just did C.
It's just those
We
first.
just
the
did
first
some.
five.
Oh, okay.
We didn't do all of C, we're just looking at the top
Oh,
5.
okay. We've discussed
I
everything
would like
else.
to remove them all from consideration. Is that a valid motion?
It is.
I would move to remove those first 5 from consideration.
Second.
Anybody second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. They have been removed from consideration. All righty, let's go to section D, perennial submissions on hold awaiting outcome of litigation. Do we want to take these as a batch? Is there anything you want to pull from this?
I think that all of these are really subject to the litigation with the exception of the term limit.
And how many times are we going to put term limits on the ballot? We should just let the election commission know it will always be there.
It's a different term, right?
Exactly. Do I hear a motion to remove these from consideration, given they're either awaiting the outcome of litigation or we don't see a need to move them forward?
I don't think remove is what I would do, but to put them on hold is, I mean, it
No,
could
I'm just
change in
saying to
the
remove them from consideration for this particular
meaning.
charter
Oh,
ballot.
yes, ma'am.
That's all that means.
Yes, ma'am, yes,
We're
ma'am.
removing it from consideration this time.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
moved.
second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I was gonna ask a question.
It's off. All right, let's go to E, preempted or achieved by other means. Let's take a look at these. We can do these in a batch as well, unless you see one you want to pull off, but I didn't see
It
anything
says it's
that-
gonna be preempted, or is that?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't see
Yeah.
anything that.
That's
we
true,
could
there's
do
anything here we can work with.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so. We can do it together.
That move, we remove all of them from consideration.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Is the, just on the amending the charter by petition, advancing similar amendment aligned with state legislation?
I think it's,
That's
I
already
was actually
done.
reading that. I think that was there was an amendment to do that was put on the last ballot.
Okay.
And approved.
That's
It was-
that's
So it
done.
should say-
That's already done.
Okay.
Similar amendment approved.
It was 10% of the electorate of the last general
Yeah, I think
election as
so.
opposed to 10% of
Total
registered voters.
Okay. Cool.
Whereas before it had been, I think, just the previous election of any kind, like even a special or whatever.
Okay.
Okay, so, do I hear a motion, we've got a motion, we need a second.
Second.
Is there any discussion, further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. We've now removed all of E from consideration. So, just to recap, on our meeting on the 25th, we will address submission A. Submission B will come back for further information. And then the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 6 in submission C. And no September council meetings through increased council appointments to boards and commissions. We will keep those pending further information. At the April 25th meeting, we will address the information, and then we will address the new submission at the next meeting. Yes, Mr. Rutherford.
So, item A automatically rolls over.
Automatically, so, yeah.
Is there any, I would ask also on that, is there any need for, I guess, discussion, or does anybody have anything they would want to be researched by staff before we do that? Before we address that one at the next meeting?
I saw a lot of info about other cities and states doing age 21. How many are doing 18?
Yeah, we can look into that. Basically like peer city
Yeah.
comparison. City, state.
I think this has been a fruitful discussion. I think
Me
we've made
too.
a lot of headway.
I agree.
We're good at this, aren't we? So, is there any other further comment, questions, considerations? Next meeting is April 25th, 4 o'clock.
So, the meeting is too early for me. Today works because I'm off today, but 4 is very early for me. So can we do, 5 works better, but I know because of staff, is 4:30 okay? I mean, even 4:30 is early, but I'm just putting it out there. That's the reason why I haven't been able to make a lot of meetings, because I'm right in the middle of my day. And so if there's any way to move it to 5, it will work a whole lot better for me, but I'm just one person, so I'm just, so
Would you guys
4 is
take a
just- 4
poll
is just not
of
good
the
for me.
committee? And just ask them if they would prefer 4:30? Just in honor of the staff, I think, starting at 5, they have to stay till midnight,
Till
2 and 3
midnight, yeah.
sometimes.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, and after meetings like this, we have to stay till midnight too.
Oh, I guess you're not working part-time either.
If you'll poll,
Double full-time is what I.
if you'll just poll the committee.
Yeah.
And ask them what's better for everybody. I'm not married to 4 o'clock. My dogs might be because they want to eat, but. Okay, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.